There are a few things I wanted to share with you about our next speaker. Number one, the City Club of Chicago is very grateful to him and his wife, Amy, for both visiting and speaking at Misericordia and encouraging everyone to give back in the same fabulous measure that which we have received. Number two, the City Club of Chicago proudly takes credit for our small part of the fabulous publicity which our next speaker earned by joining us last year at the Special Olympics Chicago Polar Plunge by inviting Jimmy Fallon and helping raise $1.2 million for children and adults with special needs. Number three, our next speaker's appointment of Brian Bannon shows he has made education and reading a top priority. Ladies and gentlemen, the Mayor of Chicago, Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Mayor?
I do want to say, you always say this about the attention for the Special Olympics and raising money, and that it took jumping in the lake while it was about 31 degrees. I really do want to say that the attention deserves to all the participants in the Special Olympics. And if you haven't seen them or haven't met with them, just meet one of them. Everybody has something to give, and they just turn your life around, and to all their families that support them. So give those kids and their families a hand, please. In all your recognition, I know it was an oversight. It's okay, I do this because it just gives me one hand. Now that Jay gives up the mic, I get to do it. I also want to recognize Jody Malkin, who's a member of the Chicago Public Library Board, who's also here. Jody. Now, I have a side job, and that's to come to City Club and introduce commissioners that are doing an unbelievable job. And I've been here, fortunately, with Mike Kelly from the Park District, who is also the Chicago Park District just this year won the gold medal, and it's the first time ever a major city has ever won the gold medal for the best park district in America. I've had the fortune to introduce Forrest Claypool, a good friend, for his modernization of the CTA and public transportation, and as a user of it. I'm appreciative of his hard work. He doesn't like it in case my train ever gets stopped. I call him directly. I don't want to talk to anybody else. Forrest, I have a meeting I'll be late for, and I just thought you should know that. Second, now he's going to hear about it soon from one of you. I've had the good fortune of introducing both Barbara Byrd Bennett and Cheryl Hyman. And I'm fortunate also now to introduce Brian Bannon, he and his Zach have become friends of Amy's and mine. And I am so proud of the work that Brian and Linda and the entire board have done in taking the Chicago Public Library to being #1 in the United States and 3rd in the world for the best libraries in America. And I will say, just so people get a sense, it is the first time ever that both the Park District and the Chicago Public Library in their respective spaces are rated #1. And in great measure, it's because of Brian and Linda's leadership and their vision and what they set out to do. And as I always joke, they're #1 in America, #3 worldwide, ahead of Beijing and Shanghai, but I am not competitive. I just thought you should know that. It's just my view of helping you with some information. I just wanted you to know that. But I do want to say, and one of the reasons, not only, but one of the primary reasons that the Chicago Public Library was recognized is that for a long time, while we always knew they were community organizations and community entities and centers in the heartbeat of a community, it's hard to be that when it's open from 9 to 6. And what Brian and Linda and the whole team have done in Brian's vision is be able to take the library and keep it open when the actual doors are closed through technology and understanding the role in technology and information. We all know what's happening with Amazon, what's happening with information, to be able to access it 24/7 from any location. Brian has taken that and brought it in so many ways to the Chicago Public Library, and making sure not only that all that information is available, but that the libraries then, as we did today when we announced with the support of both the Knight Foundation and Google, the hotspots capacity for Brighton Park, Grand Crossing, and Douglas branches, that those communities that have been part of the other side of the digital divide, we're going to be able to bridge that gap. And that the libraries, through technology, have allowed and enabled us to make sure that every part of the city is entering not only the information in that library, but accessing the world. And in the past, when I went to the library, which usually was for the writing a paper that my mother was yelling at me about, you would look up at catalogs and microfilm. And because of our U-Media centers and our 3D Maker labs today, children aren't researching the past, they're imagining and envisioning the future. And that's what Brian has basically done, and I want to thank him for his leadership on that. And I would say just basically, and he's transformed the library. And I'm going to give you one anecdote to tell you the creativity that's come to our libraries. I happen to be on the far southeast side of the city 2 years ago, and I had some time to kill, so I went to the neighborhood library. It was around 3 o'clock, and there's a swarm of kids around this one adult. So I went over and I said, "What do you do?" He says, "Oh, I'm a teacher in the library, and I teach and help kids at, after school on their homework. I know what the local school is doing and the local schools in the surrounding area, and I help them with their homework because I know what they're working on." So I went on to my next one. I immediately called Brian. Unfortunately, he's on the speed dial. I'm sure all my commissioners are going to switch their numbers. And I called him. I said, "I said, this library, they got a teacher in the library. It's unbelievable." I said, "How many do we do?" He goes, "Oh, we got about 32 of them have teachers in the library." I said, "Well, what about the other 58? He goes, "Well, we don't really have the resources." So I said, "Well, we're going to do all of them." And good news is we have a president and chairman of the board of the foundation as well as of the library board. Now all the 80 neighborhood libraries have a teacher in the library after hours to help kids on homework in their local area, knowing exactly what they're doing. But, and we did it within a year. But what was more exciting is that the person that was responsible for implementing this had known about a software that kids can go online, English and Spanish. We're the only city in the country to do it for free. And from kindergarten all the way to calculus, get help in any subject online from 8 a.m. to 11. It's the only system in the country. And the truth is, and she, the person who was supposed to implement the teacher library, and she did do it, said there's this software, and if we really want to take what we're going to do and take it not just from 2 to 6, but to when kids are doing homework at home, they need the assistance. And we, if you have a library card, which is free, the number on it is your password. You're in California on a family vacation, want to do homework, you need help, right there, free. The only library system in America that offers every child, in both English and Spanish, homework help on any subject. And the truth is, if I need to give, my kids, I want you to know in sophomore papers, I've gotten 2 A's already, I'm at 100%. Okay, I'm really good at the French Revolution, if you want to compare it to what happened in the English Revolution. If my kids want help with math, call your uncle. He'll help you. But for a lot of families in the city of Chicago, they don't have that capacity. They don't have the ability to help their kids. English may not be their first language. We have a library system that is not separate and distinct from our school system. We have a park system that's not separate or distinct from our library system and our school system. And we now are the only city in America that assists any person that calls Chicago home with the ability for their children at any grade on any topic to get live help and doing homework assistance and from any computer. And it's a revolution of how the library has been integrated in the community, integrated into the education of our children. And just so you know, not only was the Chicago Library picked as #1, and primarily for the technology and the innovation of using technology for the information, it was also received the Social Innovator Award. And this I just learned on the talking points, which I'm surprised it wasn't on the weekly report, so I never know this. CNN, it's okay, it's an oversight by me. I'm sure it was there and I never read it. CNN Money recently identified the Chicago Public Library as the main reason why Chicago is becoming one of the most innovative cities in America. And I would challenge you to find another city in the country where the neighborhood library, the place where both information and democracy is formed, the library is a contributor to a city as a tech and innovation center. And it's because of the leadership of Brian, his ability to take technology and bring it real to everybody throughout the city of Chicago. And it's also that effort not just on technology. We're the first library system to create citizenship corners in the library to help new immigrants become citizens of the United States. If they, like my grandfather, at the age of 13 who came here, sacrificed and struggled, the library, which we've all read stories and anecdotes, should be the place where folks can also then not have had just struggles and sacrifice, learn to read, learn their language, but also be on the road to becoming a full citizen of the United States. It is because of Brian's vision and leadership that Chicago is recognized as the greatest city in America, because of his ability to take our library system, which we used to think of only as bricks and mortars in our neighborhood, and now make them a gateway for our children to imagine the future. Brian Bannon.
Wow, well, thank you. I guess my job is done. And we can go to Q&A. No, so thank you, Mayor Emanuel, for that introduction and for your leadership in support of the work that we're doing at the Chicago Public Library. Much of what I'll talk about today is possible directly through your support and the support of our board. I've been to many City Club events, now as a not-so-new Chicago, and I've been here just about 3 years. And it's an honor to be among so many distinguished leaders and civic leaders. I personally want to thank Jay for inviting me to talk today. I know these folks have already been acknowledged, but I particularly want to underscore and thank our board president, Linda Johnson-Rice, for being here today, and our board director, Jody Block, for supporting, for me, being up here talking about the library, but also for what you do as a volunteer to support the work of the Chicago Public Library. We're also, there's many partners in the room that I was so happy to see coming in at the beginning, and I want to thank you for being here to hear the talk about libraries, but also for your collaboration and your partnership that makes so many of the things that we do through our neighborhood libraries possible. I know it was already mentioned, but I also want to acknowledge the private support that comes to the City of Chicago and the library through the Chicago Public Library Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Library Foundation is a separate organization completely with the sole mission of providing private support to the library through local philanthropy that allows us to do many of the programs that we'll talk about today. This year alone, the Library Foundation has pledged almost $6 million to support our programs and initiatives at the library, which is the most that we've ever had from the Library Foundation, and I know that it means we have some great years ahead of us. And particularly, I know there are many board members of the Chicago Public Library Foundation here, and I do want to again acknowledge and thank Bob Wizzo for being here today to support us, and also for your longstanding leadership on the Chicago Public Library Board and supporting our work in the city. So, a couple more acknowledgments. There are a number of folks in the room, if you could just throw your hands in the air, who actually work at the Chicago Public Library. And every day, come on, put your hands up. I want to acknowledge and thank you. We're a small but mighty group of folks. There's 1,000 of us in the city of Chicago that work on behalf of our citizens every day. And again, really, I get to talk about the work, but it really is the team that's here and the folks through them that get done what needs to get done through libraries. And I also want to acknowledge that my partner, Zach Cunningham, is here today. Being a civil servant often means long hours, and I appreciate your support, Zach, in allowing me to do this great work of libraries. Okay, so now on to libraries. So I want to talk about something that I think is a really important part of our past, as the mayor talked about, but an even more important part of our future as a city. And that's, of course, the 21st Century Library. Many of us, I think, are familiar with the 21st Century Library. We have an idea in our mind of what that might look like. But that perspective may need to be updated in light of some of the mayor's comments and some of the things I'm going to share today. And I hope that I'll change some of your views as a result of what we talk about. I've always been fascinated about public libraries as they're one of the few public spaces that sort of sit side by side with the past and the present and the future. And over the years, I've heard many inspiring stories about people's individual lives that have been transformed by their neighborhood public library. And so I thought, well, I'll start with my own. Those of you who don't know me don't know that I grew up in a small rural town in a working class family, and I was a kid who really struggled with reading and writing. I was fortunate to have parents that identified early on that I needed extra help, but I wasn't part of a family that could provide that help at home. And so it was my public library that stepped in for me at that time. It's a place where I learned reading and writing. I received tutoring. It's also a place where I learned to use my first computer. And it's also where I discovered that libraries were much more than a warehouse of books. In fact, that they were centers of learning, with caring adults who were there to help and be part of our community. And that's really where it started for me. I saw my library as a gateway to opportunity and a world far beyond the little town that I grew up in Washington State. This is early exposure coupled with discovering much later in life, actually, here's a picture of that library, much later in life that libraries have actually always been in the knowledge and information business, but we often associate them with the book business, which is an important part of distributing and sharing knowledge. But what's kept me engaged in libraries is really this idea that they're these unique and free, among the only free institutions that we have, sometimes radical, democratic institutions that really help us shape and inform and build our societies and communities. So while our libraries are changing, as the world is changing, they're changing in really exciting ways. And the role of the modern public library is a really important part of our future and healthy city. Under leadership of Mayor Emanuel, our board, and actually many of you in the room, we are evolving and reimagining what the public library can look like and how we can use it to fuel and power our cities. They become essential to the success of our competitiveness as a city, and I'm going to talk about 3 important ways that they're doing that today. So first, our public libraries as a place for strengthening our neighborhoods, which I think some of us might be familiar with that idea. Looking at public libraries as a way of educating our children, and also how we use our public libraries to support our workforce in our neighborhoods. Before we get into all of that, I want to give you a quick history lesson on libraries. Brief. I'm a librarian. What? Is it take-home? Yeah, there's a take-home exam. So this, anybody want to guess what this is? Yeah. So, libraries have been around for a long time. They're models of great cities. They've always been great libraries. The Library of Alexandria of ancient Egypt, of course, is considered to be one of the world's first public libraries. It was, an enormous public works project. But unlike the public libraries of today, it was a place where the information was actually held secret. It was only the elite and powerful that had access to the information within the walls of these libraries. It was also held as one of the most important sort of public values of its time, but the public value didn't mean sharing the information, it actually meant controlling the information. It really wasn't until Benjamin Franklin, fast forwarding a few thousand years, that we started to look at public libraries and the idea of public libraries in a new way. Franklin believed that public libraries were essential to a thriving democracy. In fact, he believed in sort of 2 big ideas, this idea of public education and public libraries. The idea, of course, with public education is that the more educated our citizens were, the more competitive and the more democratic that we would be. And he believed that that happened through structured learning, through university settings and public school, but he also thought it was important to do that through informal settings, or what we know today as public libraries. Physical spaces where people would come together around their shared interest, to learn together, to collaborate, and hopefully discover and find something new. What many people don't know about Benjamin Franklin's, he actually founded the first public library in the US, and it still operates today more as a museum in Philadelphia, is that library was a storehouse of books, but it was also the space where the leading technologies of the day, so science and technology, electrical experiments, these were all done within the walls of the library. And this is an important point as we start looking at the inspiration that we've drawn from Franklin in the modern day public library. So fast forwarding today, we know that we live in the information age. We know that we live in the thing called a knowledge economy. The idea was coined by Peter Drucker in the 1960s, and it refers to this idea that we live in a global economy that is driven by what we can think up more than what we can do with our hands. And that's an important shift in where we are today. We also know that currently half the world's population lives in cities, and that will continue to grow over time. Cities are the centers of our economic growth, and that means that we need to be looking at cities in a really important and strategic way. How do we shape our cities to support and be competitive in a global information economy? And we think that libraries have an interesting place where they can help. Unfortunately, in cities, and Chicago is not alone in this way, don't have equal access to the ideas of the day. So while we're living in a time where we have more access to more information than we ever have at any point in history, but that access is not equal. When we look at a city like Chicago, still roughly a third of Chicagoans do not have access to the internet from home. 19% of Chicagoans have never been online. And unfortunately, that distribution of access is unequal in our neighborhoods. There's certain communities in our city that more like 50 or more % of the folks aren't online. And what that means is that too many children in our neighborhoods do not have equal access to information and education in our 21st century economy. And this challenge is impacting our neighborhoods and our city's ability to be competitive. And that's where we really think the library has an interesting role. Mayor Emanuel, our board, and I believe that we can make significant progress in bridging the educational divide and the digital divide by reinvigorating our neighborhood libraries and pushing them into the future. And so I'm going to pause here because I think some of you might be asking in your minds, okay, yeah, sure, this is a problem that we need to look at as a city, but why libraries? Why are they the right place? Do people even use libraries anymore? Do they trust them? Are they really a destination? And so I want to share with you a little bit about kind of where libraries are used nationally and here in the city to give you a sense of why we think libraries might be a good match. In 2013, Pew Research Center, the national sort of nonpartisan group that conducts national research, looked at libraries and American general opinions and notions about public libraries. What's interesting, and these are library users and non-library users, found that 81% of Americans believe that libraries provide services that are hard to find other places within the community. That 94% believe that libraries improve the quality of life in their communities or in their neighborhoods. 95% also believe that libraries promote a love of reading and learning, and Americans also believe that libraries play an important role in a person's chance at success. And these are great numbers, and I think we should be feeling good about this. This is library users and non-library users. There's actually sort of a funny article that came out in the Atlantic Monthly that looked at the Pew study and compared libraries to other institutions, looking at Gallup studies and the Huffington Post. And they concluded that public libraries actually have a higher approval rating than Congress. They also did better than journalists. They actually did slightly better than baseball, which was kind of surprising to me. Apple pie as well. Public libraries are right at the top. So, it's sort of, yeah, that's pretty good, right? Okay, so I confess, this was self-serving. It was not scientific. But I think that the point is there, which is public libraries are among the most trusted institutions that we have. And they've earned that reputation over time, and that's the case nationally. We worked with Civic Consulting Alliance, and I'm glad that we have some folks in the room, this incredible organization that works exclusively with the government to make us stronger, to actually do a similar study of our current library users. So these are our current customers, and we found some really extraordinary results. That 72% of our current user base, of people who are using the library, say that we're an important part of their life. 79% of our users have a high satisfaction rate with the services that they're currently using at the library. 81% say that they use the library at least once a month. And keep that figure in mind when we start getting into the actual usage statistics of the library. And then 90% said that they would recommend the library to a friend. So of course, when I saw this, I was like, well, how can we get some of these numbers up? And Civic Consulting Alliance reminded me that these are sort of like, these are crazy high numbers that, brands like Apple would kill to get like 60 across the board. So the point is that not only do people trust and value public libraries, that they actually, here in Chicago, are providing library services that people really value, they really use, and they're really enjoying and have a high satisfaction. So I'm building our libraries up, of course. Okay, so what does that mean for Chicago? Are people actually using public libraries? So I want to give you a sense of the network of libraries that we have in the city. First of all, Chicago Public Library is one of the largest library systems in the country. We have 80 locations. You can see them sort of mapped against the city. Every neighborhood has one. 1 million, this is the number of active borrowers. This is the number of active cardholders that we have in the city. So a third of households in Chicago are actively using the library. This number was 2 million when we started playing with this data, but we excluded anybody who hadn't used the library in the last year. It's an extraordinarily high number. 3 million, this is the number of people who came to the Chicago Public Library last year to get online. Again, thinking about the digital divide. Another 3 million, this is the number of people who came to the Chicago Public Library last year to use our internet. This number doubled last year from the year before. It was 1.5 million. This number here, 10 million, this is the number of items that we checked out of the library last year. And so for those of you who are wondering if people are still sort of using libraries for traditional services, this is actually a 5% increase over last year. And another 10 million, that's the number of people who walked through the doors at the Chicago Public Library last year. This number is, just to give you a sense of context, if you took all the museums in the city and combined the number of people who walked through their doors, they don't even get to this number. I mean, it's an extraordinarily high number. And again, if you look at the network of neighborhoods that we're in, there's a reason for that. So thinking again about the important role that libraries can play in supporting our community, we've got high record numbers of use, we've got people who really use the services, and a strong public sense that these are valued and trusted institutions. It's a great platform for doing some pretty extraordinary things. Now, the mayor's sitting here. I had the opportunity to see him do a talk on libraries recently, and he talks about sort of 5 public investments that we need to make in our city. And this includes, of course, public schools, public transportation, public safety, public parks, and you heard it, yes, public libraries. And that's why together that we've added new libraries, new 21st century libraries, increased capacity, we've added internet services, computers, we've also added cutting edge technology, and we've also expanded our work with families and kids throughout this entire network of libraries over the last few years. And because of these investments, Chicagoans are using their library in greater numbers than any other point in our history. Okay, so now finally I'm going to take you on a tour of the Chicago Public Library today. I'm going to talk through sort of those 3 ideas: Chicago libraries as a neighborhood anchors or community anchors, the idea of Chicago as a place that's educating our children, and the idea of our libraries as supporting our workforces. And there's a whole much more that we're doing, but I'm just going to give you a snapshot. So this is a photograph of the Chinatown Branch Library. And as I said before, we are investing in our neighborhood libraries. Chicago has a great tradition of investing in its library infrastructure, and over the past 4 years, through the mayor, we have invested close to $70 million in new capital investments in our neighborhood libraries. This includes new buildings like the Chinatown Library that's currently under construction, or the new Albany Park Library that opened just a few months ago. This includes renovations, adding new technology, and infrastructure, a critical investment for being able to provide 21st century services. These investments are making it possible to do many of the other things that we'd like to do within the walls of these libraries. Just for example, voting. You may not know this, some of you actually might, because you probably vote at your local library. 40% of early voting happens at the Chicago Public Library in our meeting rooms. Also in our meeting rooms are block groups and book clubs and safety group meetings. Our network of public libraries are all outfitted, I think with a few exceptions, with public meeting spaces that are in heavy demand for all kinds of community activities. As the mayor mentioned before, as part of his citywide initiative to make Chicago the most friendly city to new Americans, our initiative for supporting new Americans in the libraries is creating centers where we are helping people find a path to citizenship. This is through volunteers as well as providing additional resources. We're also supporting building a community online. This is a screenshot of our brand new Chicago Public Library website, courtesy of the Chicago Public Library Foundation. And this website enjoys about 1 million visitors a month to the library. So it sets a platform for new digital services. These include ebooks. I talked before about the increased use of our collections. Our ebook checkout, this is ebooks, digital media, books on tape, books on, well, actually audiobooks, all of this available through the library website, and it's accounting for a 400% increase in use online. You can actually stream movies and TV shows and all these things that you see on Hulu's and Netflix just with your library card through the website. This is actually a new partnership that we're doing online, again, 24/7 with Zinio, the world's largest magazine subscription provider. Many of you probably use this and pay. Most of that's available for free at your local library and will sync right up to your iPad or your laptop or whatever device you're using. You can literally, these are all titles that we currently have. Forbes, The New Yorker, Wired Magazine, just about all of them. They all populate to your iPad directly. These are the kinds of digital services that are available, just as the mayor said, with your library card. Okay, so moving on, that's just a little to whet your appetite about some of the cool digital services. So how are libraries working to educate our children? You know, we sort of have the philosophy that play is learning. that we're born with a natural urge to be playful, to take risks, and to be creative, that play is really training for the unexpected, and play supercharges a child in particular's ability to create and innovate. And as it turns out, the play is actually critical in supporting play to a child's brain development. In fact, that play is so important that there's an entire field of study dedicated to it. Psychological research has established there's actually 5, depending on who the scientists you talk to, 5 types of play. There's physical play, play with objects, socio-dynamic play, symbolic play, and games with rules. I'm not going to get into all of that. I know this is an academic discussion today, but it's really important for us to understand as people who care about kids that we need to support their early learning, and play is a big part of that. That's why at the Chicago Public Library, we are spending time looking at how we support these various different activities in play, not just so we can support sort of a playful environment for our kids, but so we can bring visibility and create demonstration spaces for parents on how they can thoughtfully engage with their children around learning in the home. In fact, what we found is that kids are using these play spaces in our libraries and families are staying in the libraries much more. We're just at the very beginning of this work. It's a prototype in a few of our branch libraries, and we're looking at expanding this work beyond. Another example, the mayor just sort of stole my thunder a little bit, is on homework help. Again, as mentioned, the Chicago Public Library Foundation has been supporting homework help in our branch libraries for a long time through the Teacher in the Library program. Last year, we were able to expand that program to all of our branch locations and add support for kids online. As a result, we did 60,000 homework sessions last year, and I understand, Liz might kill me, but I think we're on track to do 100,000 homework sessions this year, which is pretty incredible. And because of the digital element, and as the mayor talked about, what's so crazy about this program, you literally, if you're a high school student that wants help with calculus, you log in and say, I'm 12th grade calculus, it connects you live with a one-on-one tutor who will help you with your questions. You actually can submit papers and they'll correct them. There's a whole crazy interactive component to this, all available for free through the Chicago Public Library. Another example of how we're supporting kids outside the classroom. We're also supporting learning in sort of the 21st century skills. On the other end of the spectrum, we've been exploring this question of how we can explore and support and expose very young children to advanced technology skills. Exposing students to coding and programming from an early age can help demystify an area that can be intimidating, while also teaching them to speak a language of the 21st century. This idea of computer programming is embedded in Chicago public schools, and so we think it's important for us to begin exposing kids to that early in libraries. And this is the reason why we partnered with Google Chicago, and I know that we have some representatives here in the room last year, and some teachers to begin lending out these things. These are called Finch robots. They're a little robot. You connect them to a computer, and you can learn one of 12 computer programming languages and begin as early as 8 years old. It's an extraordinary tool developed at Carnegie Mellon Create Labs, and we now have them circulating in our branch libraries. It was such a breakaway success. Here's another picture of kids playing with them, a computer group. You can take these home, you can play with them, and begin learning to program. It was such a great success that it's hard to get your hands on one of these. You got to get on the hold list. But one of the great stories that I learned about this sort of by accident, by listening to the radio, those of you who probably listen to WBEZ, Nyla Boodoo has a tech talk show, and she actually wanted to see if kids really could learn how to program with these Finch robots. So she got one of her staff members to get their daughter to check one of these things out. Her name's Gabby. Gabby took him home. And after playing with the robot over the weekend, Gabby then went back on the show with Nyla to show what she'd learned. And what blew my mind was not that Gabby was able to figure out how to use these things and play with them, because I was able to in the first 10 or 20 minutes. But what blew my mind is that during the interview, she started to talk about that she wanted to invent a new type of American Girl doll. So this is a kid who loves her American Girl doll. And she's like, Nyla, what I'd really love to be able to do is all these cool things with a Finch robot, make it drive, make it blink, make it talk, make it move. I'd like to be able to do that with my Finch, or with my American Girl doll. And I think these are the kinds of things, this is where kids start making the connections. And who knows, maybe this Gabby will turn into the next sort of, I don't know, the next mogul of the toy industry as a result of her exposure. Well, that might be a stretch. But the idea is the same. Is exposing kids early with these technologies is important, and particularly in a fun way that allows them to learn without necessarily knowing that we're trying to do that. U-Media, the mayor mentioned earlier, this is some of the work that we're doing with teens. U-Media is a library studio space at the Chicago Public Library that's designed specifically for teens so they can explore and create with the help of librarians and mentors, so people who are working in various different fields of digital arts. It was piloted in 2009 with help from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Pearson Foundation, and all through the support of Chicago Public Library Foundation. It was such a great success. It's now been modeled in 30 cities around the country, and we now have 11, thanks to support from the mayor and the foundation, 11 of these sites in the city of Chicago, and we're looking at expanding those over time. Teens in these spaces, they can hang out. This is what the research says. The idea is they hang out, they mess around, and they geek out. So again, at this sort of playful environment where they can follow their interests with video, 2D design, 3D design, photos, and podcasts to give you a sense of the kinds of classes. All of it's informal and driven by these teens' interests that we offer. They learn graphic design, podcasting, video photography, graphic arts, writing workshops, coding, 3D printing, public art, fashion design, and music production, and a lot more. These are classes that are happening in the walls of the public library for kids, and they can just track their interests. At its core, this work is about helping teens explore their interests and their identities in the process. It gives them access to production-oriented environments to do this. This addresses a need for teens to create their own expression and explore career potentials all at the same time. And we want to provide these types of pathways in our neighborhood libraries increasingly over time. There's actually a great story of a kid named Philip. He's a teen who's been coming to the U-Media Lab at Harold Washington Library for a couple of years. And he started working in the space because he was interested in graphic design, so he was working with a graphic design mentor to prototype a t-shirt design. After working on this for a while, he started to expand his design to sort of a makeshift fashion line. And he built a website, and he started to showcase his work and developed a brand design, and all of this with the help of U-Media staff in the space. They helped him further explore this expertise by signing him up for a summer workshop called Steam Studio, where he was able to go a little bit deeper and working with real graphic designers and artists within the fields. Fast forward to today, Philip's t-shirt design is an actual t-shirt line. It was showcased at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and he's a budding entrepreneur who hasn't yet graduated from high school. And what I think is so great about a story, there's many Philips out there through the U-Media program. Actually, Chance the Rapper, if you know him, is another U-Media success story, is that whether or not Philip becomes a graphic designer or a fashion designer, the idea is that he was able to learn the process of following his interests and taking it to the next level. And so whether it's with graphic design or whether it's computer programming or something else, it was driven by him, and we created an environment for him to be successful. So moving on to supporting our workforce, sort of a transition, I suppose, is that, along with other big cities, we're undergoing rapid transformation of our economy. And as it turns out, the library plays an important role in providing tangible support to those who need to make transitions in their careers. While computer access, is a helpful piece of it, it isn't always enough. When you think about the close to 20% of Chicagoans who have never been online before, they need more than just access, they need coaching and tutoring. So that's why the Chicago Public Library Foundation has worked with us to allow us to provide access to these computers along with digital tutors known as cyber navigators, a kind of 90s term, to provide digital coaching and mentoring to adults across the board. Last year, we provided 100,000 digital tutoring sessions through the Chicago Public Library, and these sessions help people find jobs, apply for jobs, create their first resume, and learn basic skills necessary in the digital age. And in a world where almost all business is done online, the library is among the only free spaces, certainly the largest free space, where this kind of coaching and connection can happen. Another great story is in the newly renovated Humboldt Park branch library, we serve lots of people through this program. An example is this fellow Jaime who came in. He was an elevator operator who was out of work, and sorry, not operator. He was an elevator mechanic who was out of work. And he came in and he needed to get a job. He met with the cyber navigator, and the cyber navigator started working with him to translate his job skills in engineering to another setting, and he built his first resume. And within a short time, Jaime was actually able to secure a job as an engineer working for the airport. And so this is, again, another great example of someone coming to the library, having a need, and us being able to help them on their path for success. So back to this image. As I shared earlier, 32% of Chicagoans don't have ready access to the internet from home, and 19% haven't been online at all. In addition to providing technology in the library, we are also experimenting with how we can address this problem at home. And this gets to the mayor's point about how we can bring our services beyond the walls of the library. By lending wireless hotspots to card holders, we're just beginning to experiment with that. And actually today, through a partnership with the Knight Foundation, I know John Bracken is here from the Knight Foundation, and Google, we have announced a pilot program that will literally allow you to check out a hotspot, check out a laptop if you need it, and take it home, and you can connect online. What's incredible about this program, and it's a pilot, and we're going to learn a lot from it, is that residents will be able to start communicating and learning the tools of how to stay connected, not just for that 1 hour that they get or the 2 hours they get at the library, but the full breadth of connectivity and what comes with it by taking it home. We're adding digital skills around this. We'll offer workshops and classes and really provide a much deeper network and support to those who are living in communities with lower broadband adoption rates. Who knows what we'll learn from this pilot, but if it's successful, we hope to expand these types of offering to more communities around the city. So I'm going to end on one last example. On the other end of the spectrum, we've also been helping more advanced skills in the library. Chicago's footprint in advanced manufacturing, I think, as we all know, is growing. It's part of the city's plan for economic growth and jobs. In fact, advanced manufacturing is strategy #1. And we think that the library has an interesting role in helping in that goal. And that goal is to help people understanding what is advanced manufacturing. And that's why last year that we decided to open an advanced manufacturing or maker lab in the Chicago Public Library as an experiment. This is a space that offers 3D printing, CNC milling machines, classes on how to do all these different technologies as a pop-up at the Harold Washington Library Center. What we weren't expecting was the demand. In the 6 months that we had this lab open, we had 60,000 people visit a space that's about not even half the size of this room. We had 4,000 people complete a class on some aspect of advanced manufacturing. So when we tried to close the lab, Motorola Mobility Solutions came to us and said, we think this is really important to have out there, and we'd like to sign on to fund this for another year. So we have this lab up and going again. Sort of a fun story around the lab. There's so many really cool stories of artists and entrepreneurs, but one of my favorite recent stories are actually about 2 surgeons from Loyola University. They came to us with an unusual request a few months back, and that was to print a human skull. They'd been using 3D printers for some time in surgery, but the problem is that the models cost about $4,000, and they take 2 to 3 weeks to get that model delivered back to them to use in the surgery. They actually take these models into surgery, and they use them as a guide for cranial facial surgery. So when they came to the lab, we signed them up for a class. Within an afternoon, they started printing a 3D skull. It met the sort of their criteria for taking it into the operating room. They sterilized the thing. They actually brought it into the operating room. And again, so I know it's sort of a gross picture, but what the takeaway from this is, we've actually done 3 skulls with these guys. So the takeaway from this is not that we're going to be the manufacturing place for human skulls in the city. The takeaway from this is that these guys were able to, at a medical center, walk down the street to their public library and experiment with an idea or a solution. They were able to do it at a fraction of the cost. It was just the cost of the filament, which is a few dollars as opposed to $4,000, and they're now taking this technology into the hospital. These are the kinds of things that can happen in your local library. These are the kinds of things that are happening today. So with that, these are a few examples. We're a place for kids to learn. We're supporting economic advancement. We're supporting building our neighborhoods. And we're having a lot of success, as the mayor mentioned, and a lot of acknowledgement. But none of us are off the hook. For us to sustain this success and build on the future, we can't do it alone. The library is grateful for so many of you in the room that are supporting our work today. We need you to support the work in the future. We need you to support it through your dollars, through your time, through your volunteering with kids. And we need you to help us find new ways that we can reach and deepen our engagement and support in Chicago's neighborhood. With that, I thank you for your time and your interest in the libraries.
Thank you very much, Brian. Well, obviously the public library that you describe certainly isn't the Humboldt Park branch of the public library that my father took me to every Thursday evening for at least 2 hours. It's much, much improved. Thank you very much. We have questions. There are members of our staff who will circulate. If you have a question, I see there's one over here. Just hold up your card and it'll come up here. We'll try to handle as many of these questions as we possibly can. Are you ready?
Ask away.
Okay. This is from Doug Hewitt, who's with Presence Health. I think they're located over there. Thank you, Doug. How could our libraries make our communities healthier?
How could our, well, there's lots of ways I think that we can do it, and we're looking for other ways to do it. In fact, during the Obamacare period, we used our libraries to actually help people get online to learn about healthcare and find healthcare options. So we're always looking for ways that we can do financial literacy, health literacy, and education. Our branch librarians are a great way to do it, and we also do it through partnerships through hospitals. So maybe we can talk about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question is from Graham Grady, who's with the Taft Law Firm. Graham, I know you're seated back off there to the right. Mayor Emanuel mentioned calculus as a subject of the helpline. This tells us a little bit about why Graham's a lawyer and not a mathematician. What about trigonometry?
Yes. You can also get help with English and social studies and science as well. But yes, math is a big part of the homework help.
So Graham, you can go home and tell your young son or daughter, there is help, you don't have to try. This is from Brenda Palm, who's sitting up front here. She's a member of Working in the Schools, another great organization that many of us support. How will the hotspot opportunity be promoted to families in the Chicago Public Schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for now, we're doing a pilot in 3 libraries, and once we, sort of our model at the Chicago Public Library is we like to test ideas, study our patrons, and then when we're ready to scale, we really start getting the word out. So I think for this initial pilot, our goal is primarily to get the word out in the 3 communities that we're doing the test. We'll do it through our libraries, we'll do it through the schools. There's actually press releases circulating today since we made the announcement today. We'll try to get it out on the media and we'll put it up on the web. But we're looking for suggestions if you have them.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioner, this is from Bob Dolgan, who's with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Bob, where are you? Thank you very much. Commissioner, could you talk about the introduction of non-traditional offerings such as food during the summer and the CPS labor situation and how they fit into the library's strategy?
That's a great question. As we've started to look at the way that we can best support kids in the out-of-school time space, one of the things that has come back to us actually from our children's librarians that we have many kids that the last time they had a lunch through CPS schools could be at 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and they're with us sometimes till 6 or 7 p.m. at night waiting for that next meal. So we know that there are kids who use the library after school that are hungry, and I know we've done some experiments with the Greater Food Depository about how we can get healthy snacks in the hands of kids in the out-of-school time space. We're making some progress. The Chicago Public Library Board has supported us changing our beverage policy so you can actually bring beverages in the library, which is great, yeah. And we're working on food-friendly zones that allow us for a more kind of sustained approach. But we do think that particularly for young kids, having a healthy snack after school can be an important part of supporting their learning in that out-of-school time space.
Thank you, but Bob, remember, no ketchup or mustard stains on any of the library materials that the children are using. Okay, this is from Mary Hopt, who's with People's Gas. Mayor, where are you? Right there, right in front, good. Can you tell us more about the working relationship between the library and the Library Foundation? Very good question.
Great question. So, as I mentioned before, the public-private partnership the foundation was started by one of our former board chairs, Cindy Pritzker. She went over to found the Chicago Public Library Foundation, and the idea is that much of what we do, the majority of what we do in terms of our budget is supported by the city. We have it's about $100 million, or maybe $125 million to support the Chicago Public Library. And as I mentioned, that $6 million that we're, this year that we're getting through private support is such an important part of what makes us able to use that infrastructure, makes us able to use that network of librarians in a much more powerful way. It also makes it an incredibly smart investment for the private sector. It's also a great way to be able to give money to support this mission without giving us money directly. And I think the Chicago Public Library Foundation has a 4-star rating. They're among one of the best known and best investments in the city. And they have a great track record for supporting innovation within the city through its libraries, and have allowed us to do, as I said, many of the things that you saw up here today have been born out of a relationship through the Chicago Public Library Foundation. So it's a great partnership that's actually been modeled in cities across the country, but it started here in Chicago.
And I know that none of you would care, but donating to the Library Foundation is a charitable donation. Too late for 2014, but you should start your planning for 2015 already. Okay, we have just a few more questions. Once again, our friend Graham Grady. You can tell, trigonometry, and now he's showing his age. Commissioner, you mentioned library services for youths and adults. What do you offer for senior citizens?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many other things. It's actually a branding challenge we have at the library. We do so many programs for so many different age groups, and we do actually quite a bit of work with seniors. We do programs on health care. We do actually technology trainings. It's actually very popular for seniors to take classes on getting email and that kind of thing. But we have a whole complement of classes that support, and we actually also do it through partnerships as well, as many of our other programs are done through partnerships.
Good. And the final question, it's actually my question. I was kind of curious. Is that Fairhaven Washington Library, where you spent your formative years, a Carnegie Library by any chance?
I don't think that it is, actually.
I was just curious.
No, it isn't. That's a good question. I don't think that it is.
Okay.